Well,
convenient
speaking
too.
of trying too hard, there was this awesome article on Eater about tech bros getting into bread baking, and no one
I'm
tries
sorry.
as hard as these fucking nerds.
I bet they're going to bring a lot to it and not in any way make it suck all of a sudden and run it into the ground. That's my hypothesis. We'll see what happens.
Let's see if you're right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry in advance for my people.
Are you claiming tech bros?
I mean, I kind of have to. I mean, they are like,
No, I get
I know
you.
a lot of them.
That's how I feel about the Southern Slavs.
like, do you do you know how many conversations I've had about Bitcoin? Like,
Jesus Christ.
That's a great sentence. I'm going to put that on your headstone when you die.
So, for those who don't know what we're talking about, let me give you a few dope quotes. So, essentially, the tech bros always casting about for a way to save their souls because they're being consumed by the garbage industry they're in, have decided to move towards bread baking, specifically sourdough bread. So here's sort of the good quote that describes the situation here. Fred Binninson, a former VP of data and now a fellow at Kickstarter, real cool guy, created a thorough, detailed spreadsheet that breaks down the timing to bake this country loaf in precise increments down to the minute. There are now high-efficiency tools like the $245 Forno home oven, which absorbs, stores, and radiates heat evenly. If that
like
is
an oven.
Yeah, as if that's somehow an advancement.
No, damn. They created a need I did not know I had that I can
They're
fulfill by spending capital.
They are so good at inventing things that already exist.
Justin Lamb, a mechatronics engineer, did an extended experiment with monitoring his sourdough starter through computer vision. The head of communications at Microsoft has, quote, owner of a fine sourdough starter in his Twitter profile.
Yeah, those guys fuck.
I mean, the starter maybe. Like, yeah, it's depressing. Taking all of the fun out of baking. I can understand having the like primal urge to do something with your hands when you're on computers all day. Like, I get that. That's part of why I do what I do. But then they immediately suck everything that's like therapeutic about baking out of it, like feeling the dough and knowing and being comfortable with it, and turn it into just another spreadsheet, and that's so alien.
Yeah, it's a. Go ahead, John. What's up?
I was going to say, Rob, this is a lot like when you're talking about MMR in Dota and whatnot. Like,
Okay.
it seems like the same kind of thing. Like, these people could just be like, they could have just done the normal thing nerds do and just get really into video gaming and then try and like science the hell out of that. But instead they're making bread, which I guess is a little better, but oh man, it's just soulless.
Yeah, no, this reminds me of people that like actually, and we have this in New York, and I know this secondhand, so I'm one dimension removed from how dorky this is. But like tech bros will show up to Dungeons and Dragons get-togethers and just bring in these character sheets that are super min-max so that they get every possible like PowerPoint out of it. And when people are like, "Oh, fare thee well, sire, we shall be at the tavern," they're like, "Yo, I'm going to run out of my buff in 30 minutes. Let's go." This is the bread equivalent of that.
It's a good way to describe it. These dudes are trying to min-max bread. That's fucking weird. Like, here's... This Benison dude talks about it. Bread, quote, has all these degrees of freedom. That's a term people use in algorithms where there are lots of different possible ways that something could be implemented. You can do creative coding, and at the end of the day, you're just like, I made a form on a web page. It doesn't have an audience that is going to viscerally appreciate it like a loaf of sourdough. Yeah, the visceral part of it, dude, is the part where it's the therapeutic, the sort of, you're connecting to this practice that has existed for millennia. Don't be a fucking weirdo and turn it into a science project. Like, the part of this that frustrates me is that they're approaching every hobby the same way they approach their work life, which is to act like a robot. When the reason you're trying to find these hobbies in the first place is because you are an emotional being and you need some outlet that's not another fucking robotic approach to it. And baking is a good fucking outlet but it doesn't work if you turn it into a mathematical equation, because you are never going to capture all of the different factors in the environment that make a cake perfect or piece of bread perfect.
Yeah, well, bread especially, you have things like wild ferments. You can't control every aspect of it. You can't control the humidity of the room. You can't control the exact temperature of any given room. Like, there's a point in the article where Chef Robertson from Tartine in San Francisco, which is like, it's this sourdough bakery, and that's kind of why they've all latched onto it. It's right there in San Francisco. But they're they're coming up to him on the street and saying, like, but what if the temperature is 2 degrees off? And he's like, I don't know. Like, they're literally bothering the man. Like, he's like, you can't just tell me the bread is good. Like,
or you just get experience. Like, it's a lot of, there's a reason why anything made by a grandma who's been cooking her whole life tastes 1,000 times better than what you're going to make. Just a lifetime of wisdom and experience will make the end product better, right? Like, grandma magic is a fucking thing for baking, and no one can convince me otherwise. That's why Southern food from an old grandma is 1,000 times better than anything I could ever make.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the grandma cooking thing too, because that's another thing that keeps coming up in this article, is that the differences in gender and the way that men and women are, like, approaching the recipes, and how, like, making bread is still seen as something that's a little bit more masculine than making pastries and making desserts, which is still seen as somewhat feminine, even though a lot of the most famous, like, European pastry chefs are men.
Yeah,
and it's just frustrating that there's still so much gender, and then you have, like, any famous male chef, and he's going to talk about how great his grandma's food was, you know. And it's such
there's this interesting through line,
so sexist,
both in this article, and I mean, I think it's reflected at large in the industry too, of the difference in gender dynamics and how people approach food, where if you're a man, you automatically get this level of respect. So Tartine, this bakery that started it all, it's run by a couple, right? And the wife is the one doing everything but the bread, essentially. So the original article they got, the original description they got from, the original review that they got, which was very complimentary. Mark Bittman wrote a nice thing about them. It was about her, Liz Pruitt. There it is.
Yeah.
So Liz Pruitt is the one making all of the French style pastry, which is incredibly complicated. She's the one who Mark Bittman devotes most of his really amazing review to, and then he sort of like offhandedly mentions this dude Chad Robertson, her husband, who does the bread, and then later he publishes a book and that blows up. So to this day now, their bakery is now being discussed as his thing, right? This thing that he created because of the bread, and the same thing happened previously with the whole no knead bread recipe thing. A woman, Suzanne Dunaway, wrote an entire book on it in '99. No one noticed. It got no fanfare. And then in 2006, Mark Bittman writes about this dude, Jim Leahy, who has a no-knead bread recipe, and that blows up, right?
Uh-huh.
And you see
That's good bread.
It is. Both of those are good. I've used both the book and his recipe, and they're both awesome, especially because I'm lazy.
Nice.
But you see it over and over again in this, both in this article, and again, I think it reflects a broader issue here, which is when a man starts talking about these things or gets involved in this world, suddenly it's considered, now it's interesting. Now all of these bros in Silicon Valley, it's good for them. So when Robertson wrote his book about bread, then now it's a big deal because this guy wrote a book for us, helping explain how to do this shit, which is infuriating and ridiculous because they're just ignoring a huge portion of the pastry world, of the professional pastry chef world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what happens. It's with female chefs, with pastry chefs, with bakers. It's not a big deal until a guy does it. It's like we were talking about Southern food earlier, and I said I love Edna Lewis, and it's funny because when I was looking for a recipe, the first thing I did was I grabbed Sean Brock's cookbook. And I was like, this recipe is ridiculously technical, and I don't have these ingredients. Let me see if Edna Lewis has a recipe. And she did, and it was freaking awesome. Like, it's so frustrating that that's perpetuated by this, even unintentionally, just that it's like these reclusive male circles where things just keep, it's a feedback loop.
Yeah, but Anna, do you ever just like bite into a piece of barbecue and go like, damn, did a mysterious ass man make this? I can taste the difference.
This barbecue this was touched by a woman. This is unclean.
This barbecue's a little too emotional.
You really think that the difference in barbecue is regional, but it's not. It's 100% gender. Sorry, guys.
Barbecue is 100% gender.
This is a whole new approach to barbecue that I've never thought about till now.
It's like an old English, like, you know, you have to, if it's the blood moon, the women have to be sent away or they'll spoil the milk. Like, they'll ruin the barbecue.
No, they got to stand by the smoker for the full 18 hours. This is perfectly formulated to trigger people on the right, being like, hey, you know your barbecue? It's gendered now. Hey!
Gender reveal barbecue.
So the article even mentions this, that these bros just like walk in and elevate other men. And the quote was like, these tech bros who often unknowingly operate in closed loop communities where men elevate men. Quick pause here. There's no unknowingly. People have been really fucking clear that you only interact with other bros, you weirdos. Like you know what's happening. You just choose to keep doing it because you're comfortable. Anyway.
No, I'm pretty sure they literally just ignore all criticism and only care about what other bros say. So, yeah, they actually have not noticed it.
Counterpoint, and look, now to play devil's advocate here, is there any chance that they'd be open to women, but they go, yo, all you guys do is talk about JavaScript and sourdough. I'm fucking bouncing.
At that point, I agree with the women. Like, why bother interacting with them at that point?
I mean, there are a lot of women who only care about like JavaScript or baking or whatever. It's just I guess most of them do actually have like some sort of hobby outside of that, which does make you a bit different than the tech bro.
And here's the real important bit. Most women, because of the way our culture trains the various genders, are capable of baseline emotional interaction and have a baseline emotional intelligence that these tech bros fucking lack. In all things.
Hey,
I don't follow.
This guy keeps trying to red pill me on Ezekiel bread. I think I'm just going to leave.
Like, the whole tech community is an entire community that desperately needs just the basics of, like, recognizing their own emotions. I feel this way when I do this thing. Like, yeah, no, you guys just need to figure it out. It's a little scary. I get it. Masculinity is broken, so we're all flying blind here, and no one wants to explain to you that there are more emotions than hungry, horny, and angry, of which only one of those is an emotion. But, you know, probably the right time to start figuring it the fuck out. You can do mathematical research on it, guys. Just make the attempt to connect with anything other than a goddamn spreadsheet on how to do any activity in your life.
See, and this is why the getting them into anime helped a bit, because
oh yeah, here we go. I'm shadowboxing right now. I'm killing it.
I mean, it just does give them a venue into fiction that does at least often have some kind of emotional pull, which you're definitely not getting from what they get otherwise. Of course, it doesn't really work most of the time, which is why we have so many anime Nazis, but
oh my god, John.
Sorry. If we start talking about tech bros, I've got a lot pent up inside, and it's just going to kind of explode out.
Go off, King.
Yeah, does anyone else want to use slurs while we're in the non-publishable bit of this?
Wait. Did I use a slur?
Go for it, John.
Did I use a slur? I don't think I did.
No, but if you've got one, let's.
Oh, no.
No, I'm saying there's no possible way this anime chunk is making it.
I don't know. I kind of love it.
Oh, fuck. All right.
I love that he started with. I love that he started with. No, this is why anime is important, but it's not working. They're all Nazis.
I mean, it gets some of them out. Like, that's all you can hope for.
I just like to point out that this conversation started, like, just so how far we've fallen. We started on, if I'm correct, the creation of sourdough bread as refutation of the determinist metaphysics of Laplace's demon, i.e., the grandmother's hands and the unknowability of space. And now we're on anime is important because it makes Nazis. Wait, hold on. Let me...
I'm just saying the Nazis were being made anyway.
Thank you for that, John.
Oh, you're welcome.
I will say the other little bit of this is these dudes are inserting themselves into the baking world and they're posing as experts because, of course, if you are an expert at coding, you're an expert at everything. That's how that works.
Definitely.
But one of the other really awesome bits in here is that they're all terrified of being emasculated because they bake. Like, just fucking terrified of it. This dude Robertson talks about it like, women are more matter of fact with the bread recipe. They just make it. Yeah, that's what you do with recipes, Robertson. You fucking make them.
As opposed to what?
As opposed to breaking it down into its constituent parts and putting it on a spreadsheet and roll testing.
I gotta make this as scientific as possible, lest someone question the alphaness of my job as UX developer at Google.
Like, what are you going to do if you give your colleague a slice of bread and he asks what the exact hydration level was and at what temperature was your second ferment? I mean, if you don't know the answer, you're done with this company.
Yeah, you're never going to fuck again.
So, quick story, because this does hit home for me. I got really into baking basically since I was a kid because my mom bakes a lot and my grandma bake a lot because they're Southern. But I didn't start baking weekly until I was in the military and I was stationed in Germany. And I was on night shift in Germany in a small town, so there's nothing to do past like 8 o'clock. And we had rotating weekends, so you didn't even have the same days off as your friends. Like if you did, that was a huge event where like you definitely plan a whole thing around it. So usually you're on your own in the middle of nowhere for 15 hours with nothing to do. So I would just bake all the time and I'd try new recipes and I'd take them into work. And at first, there was a little bit of weirdness where people are like, why is this guy bringing in cakes and pies? But the food was good. So all of the younger people, which was most of the unit, most people were under 24, 25, they would just shut up and eat it. My biggest issue early on was actually that all of the kids from small towns in the Midwest were terrible at trying new stuff. So I'd have to convince them, like, I know this sounds a little weird, because it incorporates 2 new flavors, but like, I promise you, it's good. Just give it a shot. And so that worked fine. But the crusty old sergeants, the dudes in the like 40s to 50s, were always a little weird about it. And then one time I brought in chocolate cupcakes with a raspberry jam filling and a raspberry mascarpone whipped cream frosting. And they were delicious. But color theory here, raspberries red, mascarpone and whipped cream are white.
That checks out.
Which makes pink, right? So it's pink icing. And so I sit down, I bring the cupcakes in, I sit down and people are eating them. And this master sergeant leans over and he's like, so what are they pink? I was like, I explained color theory to him just to be a dick. And he was like, no, I know that, but like, come on, like, why are they pink? And I was like, again, red plus white. He was like, you know what I mean? Come on, man. Like, why are you making pink cupcakes? It's like, listen here, Master Sergeant. Why don't you try them? And if you still have dumbass questions, we can talk about them at that point. And he tried one and then apologized, and it was awesome.
I just realized for the first time ever that your Master Sergeant was hitting on you. You mentioned that you didn't say it this time, but he had his boot up on the desk, and he was going, come on, though. Why are you making it pink? And you were just so clueless. Oh, you're the villain in the story.
Oh no. Well, he was married, and I don't fuck with that.
In that case, it definitely could have happened.
So the whole them being terrified of women thing and being terrified of being emasculated because they bake is so inherently absurd to me because it's food. It's like the fat kid in me is like, who gives a shit? Just enjoy the tasty food. Enjoy the fact that you found something that like you enjoy, that's a creative outlet that is also tasty. And don't be weird tech bros about everything. Just calm the fuck down about it. Oh, here it is. This dude's talking about his baking. It's like, quote, my girlfriend made this point that was like, maybe sourdough is interesting to male nerds because it's this way to be precise in cooking that doesn't involve pastries, which has this very gendered association.
Yeah, I don't want anyone to think I'm gay.
That's what he said. His poor girlfriend is like, sure, dude, it's super masculine. Yeah,
he went on the record with a journalist and said, I'm afraid of croissants. And no, I won't say it croissant because then you're super gay.
Listen, I'm also afraid of croissants, but just because that dough takes forever to make.
Brother, ain't that the truth?
They're a pain in the ass.
One last thing before we move on, because the term that these people use on social media made me gag a little. And this whole opening is basically rich, bored people trying to find new shit to do.
Oh, yeah. No, I remember this. Yep.
So it starts with this is how this thing opens. Your local bakery likely sells decent loaves of it. Your favorite farm-to-table restaurant is charging for it. And if you keep the company of millennials with sufficient disposable income and leisure time...
Oh, by the way, yes, I, as a millennial, definitely have a favorite farm-to-table restaurant. And I spend apparently sufficient disposable income and leisure time with my millennial pals. Continue. So far, you're checking all the boxes.
You're surely fewer than 2 degrees of separation from a sourdough bread baking hobby.
That's a scary thought. Continue.
These well-off, internet-raised 20 and 30-somethings have
Wait, what? Who are these well-off 20 and 30? God damn it.
I mean, I guess the tech bros, right?
Literally just tech bros.
Yeah.
These internet-raised 20 and 30-somethings have turned to baking bread to self-impose a little offline time. It can take upwards of 40 hours to make just one loaf.
Girl, same.
To get closer to their mythical human roots, to go back to a time when everything took forever and nothing could be seamless. If you didn't know about this new offline hobby, don't worry. It's being obsessively documented online. Crumbshots, images of the interior texture of a loaf of sourdough, are now pandemic on social media as novelty milkshakes once were.
Oh, I'm dabbing my brow with a seersucker sponge right now.
That's the first time I've heard anyone say Crumbshots, and it's hysterical.
Yeah, the best part is that you're saying, oh, it's this great way to get your people offline, and then it's like, oh, and they're all, of course, it's all going on social media.
Everything is documented.
Yeah,
every single aspect.
He didn't even make it through the rest of the paragraph to be like, psych, it's definitely going to dominate your life online.
Of course.
Not for nothing. Crumbshots are now as pandemic on social media as novelty milkshakes once were. A, it's a reference I don't get.
That is a curse sentence.
B, calling something a pandemic of Crumbshots is just... That's obviously terrible writing. That's a cursed turn of phrase. That said, it will 100% be slightly amended. The title of a new project I'm working on. I will not be talking about it here.
The first time someone said it, they went and high-fived the dude next to him. Because we know exactly what they mean when they're saying that.
Oh, when you search Instagram for Crumbshots, it's just a series of what are clearly the hands of white men holding sourdough bread.
The big hands. You can see how large and manly their hands are. They like hold out 2 halves of a perfect loaf.
It's funny too. That's such a rookie mistake because actually the large hands makes the Crumbshot look smaller.